I'd like to know what their party's views are in restoring the 3-mile zone to protect the seabed from dredging and trawling, allowing destroyed habitat to be restored, fish stocks to improve, and marine tourism and revenue to increase.
As I understand it, I mean, the policy position is that we're not proposing to have a new 3-mile limit, but that's because ministers believe that a better way could be achieved of achieving the goal that's being sought with this. So taking a more kind of tailored approach, depending on the local circumstances. So I think it's not so much the principle, if you like, of the idea of trying to work in that way to protect those inshore waters, but taking a more sophisticated approach than having a kind of blanket 3-mile limit. So I appreciate I'm not schooled in the merits of the previous 3-mile limit and its benefits previously, but as I understand the proposal from a party point of view and from the Scottish Government perspective previously, is that we would take a more tailored and bespoke approach at a local level to make sure that appropriate protection was given to habitats that were at risk of being overfished.
3-mile ban on fishing. The concerns that we have on this is twofold. One, there's a report came out in 2015 from the Scottish Government showing that while 3-mile bans do have good benefits in some areas, a blanket ban does not increase those advantages across the whole of the country. So to take it as a Scotland-wide approach does not have the merits on this basis. We'd also be concerned of the preferential treatment this gives to creel fishermen as opposed to trawlers, and actually the impact that banning trawling can have on, for example, more creel infrastructure on the seabed. So a report by the Scottish Fishermen's Federation said that if you were to introduce a 3-mile limit to match the amount of fish that you'd lose from that swap, you'd have to increase the amount of creeling by 10-fold, which would increase from 1.2 million to 12 million pots on the seabed. And that impact would have a huge effect on the bed as well. So we need to take both sides of the argument into account. So on the basis, no, the Scottish Conservatives wouldn't support a 3-mile ban universally across the country, but would certainly be willing to look at this in certain areas where we think the merit is there.
I think anything that is going to help replenish our marine ecosystems and our seafood stocks, we would definitely support. It's not typical, these industries, fishing industry, seafoods, are not typically viewed as female sectors, but actually over 40% of the fish and seafood processing industry is female. Around 12% of the UK's fishing sector and 11% of the aquaculture sector is female as well. And there's a lot of women doing invisible work in these industries. And I think, therefore, anything that is going to increase, these stocks and is going to help the sustainability of these industries in an environmentally friendly way, we would be in favour of. And if a 3-mile limit is going to help with that, and that is what environmental experts are saying is what it's going to take, then that's what needs to happen. But it needs to come with some kind of enforcement again. Otherwise, you could end up with the same situation as marine protected areas.
It's back to what I've said, is getting the balance right, and it's about the industry doing it for their benefit. Once you start introducing things, the human nature is to try and circumvent it. A situation arose up in beside Burghead where the larger boats were coming in inshore and decimating the stocks there. It took away the livelihood for the smaller fishermen, the sustainability. So wearing my inshore hat, I think anything that can be done to protect the sustainable fishing of inshore small boats has to be encouraged. But a line in the sand, you could say, is probably not the solution, because without the buy-in from the industry, there's always going to be issues. And how do you monitor it? How do you control it? But there's certainly scope to do something. Absolutely. Back to my point about MPAs, is getting it right, getting the industry the buy-in. It can be delivered. And
sorry to interrupt. You're not saying, are you, that if a 3-mile ban was introduced, fishermen would breach it or find their way around it?
Well, they did. Well, human nature. Certainly, there was a gentleman's agreement which was stuck to very rigidly, and as I said, the industry have made a lot of effort to work to sustain the fishing stocks. Putting a line in the sand to say you can't do X, Y, or Z in that area. I totally agree. The damage that is done with the dredging, that is not good. The calls in the middle of the night I used to get with the creels all dragged up by trawlers coming in. So there is merit in doing something, but I would put the emphasis on the actual fishermen to sit around the table and deal with that.
I'm assuming the gentleman's agreement and the fishermen you talk of include women, right?
Well, I would include everybody. That would include the community as well, because they have them. They suffer from any impact. So the industry, whether it's female or male or whatever, just people working in the industry.
Just listening to John there, I never understand why so many people in politics these days talk about lines in the sand. Surely the whole point about a line in the sand is that they're not supposed to be permanent. This is something where we do actually need to have a fresh way of looking at it. You made the point yourself, Rob, that it's getting on for 40 years now since we abandoned the 3 mile limit. And the industry has changed beyond recognition in that 40 years. So, the sort of inshore fleet that we had on Isla when I was growing up there in the 70s and the 80s, possibly as a consequence of that change, possibly because of other factors as well, is largely gone. And if we are to try and recreate something of that sort with a smaller, more sustainable inshore fleet, then I think we're absolutely right to look at the sort of idea of a 3 mile zone. I think I see this essentially as an extension of the earlier discussion about MPAs. And I think in the first instance, if we were, at the moment we're talking about it in the abstract, we don't have the hard data that we really need. So if you could find communities where you could bring the industry and the scientists and the community and the conservationists all together and pilot something like this, then you would be able to see the actual benefit that you would get from it, or not, as the case was going to be. And I think, just to pick up one of the points that John made, though, you've got to take the industry with you when you're talking about this sort of thing. If any sector in the fishing industry, be they fixed or mobile gear or whitefish or even pelagic, but it seems unlikely, if they see this as being something that is done to them, then immediately it becomes divisive. If you are able to build that consensus and to demonstrate a commercial advantage by better, more sustainable fisheries management, then you'll take them with you.
So that's a yes?
It's not a yes to the sort of proposal of an automatic reinstatement. It would be a yes to allowing communities to come forward with a proposal that would then be the pilot that would let us make an informed, evidence-based decision on this, rather than just talking about it in the abstract.
Yeah, sort of a yes. Mark, if I was to guess, I would say you're in favour of reintroducing the 3 mile limit?
Yeah, and I made that point in my opening comments because, I talk about line and sand. I think we're at a crisis point, and we need to see recovery, and we need to see restoration of our inshore areas, and we need to recognise what the long-term economic benefits will be. But I think the difficulty is that even if we can't even have a pilot to try this out, then it makes it very difficult then to convince the wider industry, dredging and trawling industry, of what the benefits could be. And I think that's why I'm disappointed that the pilot that was proposed, I think in South Skye, was knocked back by the Scottish government, because we have to start somewhere. But I think we're at a crisis point, and this just is a no-brainer to me. It should be put forward, and I think the economic benefits, in particular to the creeling sector, which is a high value sector, we shouldn't ignore that. And within that, there's the hand dive scallop sector as well. So there are lots of economic opportunities for regenerating our seas in this way, but we've got to fully understand them. We've got to start somewhere, and doing pilot projects quickly, I think, would make a good start.
it's a really important issue, how we go forward sustainably for our inshore waters. It's not only about inshore fisheries, it's about all the other aspects of it that work together. And I think that but the regional marine plans will be fundamental in bringing people together. And I think the Eclair Committee went to Shetland, Orkney, and the pretty contentious area of the Clyde, where there are so many conflicts, and I think that it will be important to have pilots for this. It may be that it's a blunt instrument, and it may be that even further out there should be certainly more prevention of dredging and trawling. So it's not only about that exact 3 mile limit. I do think, I mean, Scottish Labour has a commitment to have an inshore fisheries bill, and I think consultation on that will take forward discussion between stakeholders about the best way forward. And we're also, of course, as a Labour movement, very strongly committed with the unions and with many communities to a just transition. So if there were ways in which the fisheries could become more sustainable in our inshore waters, that is certainly something that we'd support. But we're not absolutely committed to a specific 3 mile limit at the moment. We're committed to sustainable inshore fisheries.